For thousands of years, gold has been regarded as a symbol of prosperity, authority, and stability. This precious metal has not only been used as jewelry, but has also functioned as a medium of exchange and a store of value. However, despite gold's central position in the history of human civilization, understanding of its origins, the transformation of its functions, and its meaning within the modern economic system is often reduced to a myth of eternal resilience, unsupported by adequate historical and structural analysis. Archaeological records indicate that gold mining activities have been taking place since at least around 4000 BCE. In its early phase, gold was obtained from alluvial deposits along riverbanks and lowlands using very simple technology. The regions of Asia Minor and Macedonia are recorded as early centers of precious metal exploitation. As civilizations developed, mining techniques advanced significantly, particularly during the Roman period. The Romans developed hydraulic systems to separate gold from soil material, expanded exploitation into mountainous regions, and increased production scale in a systematic manner. Interestingly, Roman mining methods demonstrate a long historical continuity. Similar techniques were reused during the California gold rush of 1849, indicating that innovation in gold extraction tends to develop slowly and incrementally. Alongside the expansion of international trade networks, gold spread to various major civilizations, including India and China, which began incorporating it into barter-based exchange systems. A major monetary innovation occurred in the 7th century BCE when the Lydians minted the first coins made from a mixture of gold and silver, electrum. These coins facilitated daily transactions and stimulated economic growth, making Lydia one of the most advanced economic centers of its time. This practice was later adopted by Greece and Rome, which gradually solidified gold and silver as widely recognized cross-regional media of exchange. Even earlier, around 3100 BCE, King Menes of Egypt had introduced a standard exchange value between gold and silver at a fixed ratio. This policy became an early foundation for precious metal-based price valuation systems that later developed across various civilizations. Entering the early modern era, the role of gold became increasingly institutionalized. In the 19th century, many industrial nations adopted the gold standard, under which national currencies were directly pegged to gold reserves. Britain officially implemented this system in 1816, followed by European countries and the United States. The gold standard provided international exchange rate stability and promoted global trade, but it also created structural rigidity in monetary policy. Dependence on gold reserves limited states' ability to respond to economic crises through monetary expansion. This tension culminated during World War I, when the need to finance warfare forced many countries to suspend gold convertibility. Attempts to revive the gold standard after the war proved fragile and ultimately collapsed during the Great Depression. The United States officially abandoned the domestic gold standard in 1933 under the administration of Franklin D. Roosevelt, followed by other countries. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system emerged as a compromise between stability and flexibility. Under this system, the US dollar was pegged to gold, while other currencies were pegged to the dollar. However, rising deficits and global imbalances rendered the system unsustainable. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the convertibility of the dollar into gold, marking the end of gold's role as a direct anchor of the global monetary system and ushering in the era of fiat money. Since then, the function of gold has undergone a fundamental transformation. Gold no longer serves as a currency backing, but has shifted into a store of value asset and a hedging instrument, safe haven. Its value is not determined by microeconomic performance, but by perceptions of global risk, inflation, and macroeconomic stability. This pattern was clearly visible during the 2008 global financial crisis and various geopolitical tensions in the 21st century. However, perceptions of gold often extend further. An assumption has emerged that extreme geopolitical crises, including the possibility of a world war, would return the global economic system to gold and silver-based exchange. This narrative has strengthened alongside rising geopolitical tensions and discursive warfare on social media. Conceptually and strategically, this assumption is flawed. In a realistic World War III scenario, the conflict would almost certainly involve nuclear weapons. The impact of nuclear war would not be limited to economic destruction, but could potentially end human civilization through mass radiation, ecosystem collapse, and environmental conditions no longer suitable for habitation. In such circumstances, the accumulation of gold and silver becomes irrelevant because no social, economic, or biological structures would remain to sustain transactions. It is precisely this awareness of total destruction that gave rise to the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Nuclear weapons function as tools of deterrence, not as rational instruments of war to be used. The absence of any winner in nuclear war renders such a scenario strategically irrational. If a return to a gold-based economic system is incompatible with modern strategic realities, then the next crucial question is, what form of value is most compatible with a digitized, fragmented world saturated with structural uncertainty? In October 2008, amid a global financial crisis that shook trust in banks and states, Satoshi Nakamoto, one of the most mysterious anonymous identities in history, published a short paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. A new innovation was born, one that few realized would later shake the financial world. Unlike previous monetary reforms, which were always initiated by states or major institutions, Bitcoin emerged from outside the system as a direct response to the structural failures of fiat money and humanity's dependence on trust intermediaries. Historically, Bitcoin can be understood as an attempt to reconstruct the properties of gold, scarcity, political neutrality, and resistance to manipulation, within an entirely new medium. If gold derives its value from geological scarcity and cross-civilizational social consensus, Bitcoin derives its value from algorithmic scarcity and cryptographic consensus. There are no mines that can be politically accelerated, no central banks that can print new supply, and no state that can claim full sovereignty over its network. Thus, Bitcoin is not a rejection of the history of gold, but its continuation in a form more compatible with a post-industrial, post-nation-state, and post-institutional trust world. In this context, crypto assets should be understood as a logical evolution, not a speculative anomaly. Bitcoin represents the first form of value that does not fully depend on centralized institutions, but instead on networks and mathematics. The limitations of Bitcoin's technology were later addressed through altcoin innovations, particularly Ethereum. The technology developed by Vitalik Buterin and the Ethereum Foundation is far more radical than most people imagine. Ethereum is not merely a speculative asset, it has entered the existential domain. At its core, Ethereum is a distributed state machine, a system in which value, rules, and ownership are identically replicated across thousands of global nodes. Through smart contracts, Ethereum automates trust and enables economic institutions to operate without intermediaries. Moreover, the technology underlying the Ethereum network positions it as the strongest candidate for the most adaptive asset even under the most extreme scenarios. If gold is a civilizational artifact, then Ethereum is a blueprint for economic civilization. In the most extreme scenario, global institutional collapse, the question of which money survives becomes less relevant. What matters more is which systems can be deterministically rebooted. Within this framework, Ethereum is not merely a candidate for future currency, but an economic infrastructure that can theoretically be inherited across civilizational collapse. If one day humanity rebuilds an economic order from the remnants of preserved knowledge, gold may be rediscovered as a gleaming metal. But a value system that can be immediately reactivated, complete with rules, ownership, and economic logic, would exist in only one form, a network. And among the networks humanity has ever created, Ethereum comes closest to that idea. Furthermore, records of humanity itself can be stored on the Ethereum network through non-fungible token, NFT, technology and decentralized storage mechanisms. Core data is not stored directly on the blockchain, but referenced via cryptographic hashes pointing to distributed storage systems such as IPFS or Arweave. As long as protocol specifications, state transition rules, and copies of the ledger can still be replicated, the Ethereum network can theoretically be reconstructed, even after the destruction of global internet infrastructure, through node reinitialization and cryptographic verification. In this sense, Ethereum is not merely a transaction medium, but a civilizational memory layer that can be deterministically revived from mathematical consensus rather than institutional or physical authority. Ultimately, debates about gold, fiat money, or crypto are not merely questions of financial instruments, but reflections of how humanity defines trust, continuity, and hope for the future. Each historical phase produces a form of value aligned with the power structures and technologies of its era. In a world that is increasingly institutionally fragile yet technologically interconnected, value no longer rests solely on objects, but on systems capable of preserving memory, rules, and human coordination. It is at this point that discourse on value ceases to be about what is oldest or rarest, and shifts toward a far more fundamental question: which systems allow civilization to remember, rebuild, and begin again?